Welcome to Two-Way Tonight. I'm Mark Halperin, your tour guide through the madness. I hope you're just watching Meghan McCain show. It's fantastic. Uh, Go watch it on demand if you haven't watched it yet after you watch this. Super interesting conversation. And they talked about a topic that we're going to talk about at length tonight. Once again, we're going back to the well of liberal media bias. It's so important that the country move forward with everybody feeling there's fairness. And the reason why we keep beating the same drum on the issue of Joe Biden's mental acuity, rather than doing show after show on all the things in the Trump administration we could cover, which we do also, is because people on the left and in the media don't seem to understand why this is so significant. They don't seem to understand it. And they say, well, January 6th, also very significant. I had an endless email colloquy with one of you over the course of this week. When I say endless, there's a lot of back and forth. And this person kept saying false equivalency, false equivalency. January 6th, so much worse than the cover up. No, really not. They're both horrible, both stains on the country and really important to grapple with, no doubt. But here's the difference. In one case, the media participated in a cover up with one of the two parties. Imagine if the media was so sympathetic to Donald Trump that they had not covered January 6th. Now, I know some people on the right think the coverage was overboard or not always accurate. Fair enough. But it was covered pretty extensively and mostly fairly, But imagine if the press had participated in a cover-up of that and downplayed it and pretended it didn't happen and not just ignored it, but actively participated in a cover-up. Again, it's not a perfect metaphor, but we're going to run through once again what happened in light of something we've talked about this week. This guy, Alex Thompson, who writes for Axios, one of the few reporters who made a really good faith effort to cover what happened. And then he gave a speech at the White House Correspondents' Center on the weekend in which he said, we need to hold ourselves accountable. We have to acknowledge not just that the team Biden covered it up, but that the press didn't do a good enough job. And I praised him, but I also criticized him. And his PR person tweeted at me and said, it's dishonest to say he was dishonest. Well, I respect the guy, and I pray that his book has a full accounting of what the media did wrong, but I don't think it does from what I've heard. But book that he wrote with Jake Tapper, who was not as aggressive, let's say, in covering the story. In any event, we're going to walk through again what happened, why it's important, and how significant it would be if the people who work in the current White House or who like the current president could feel comfortable that the people who are currently covering him are fair, as opposed to the very same people and organizations who participated in the cover-up. So we're going to walk through that again with two great guests, Drew Holden, managing editor of American Compass, and I would say America's witch doctor on these matters in a positive way. I'm a pro-witch doctor. And Michael LaRosa, who worked in the Biden White House. And I can't say enough about how important he is. He's not singular, but how important Michael is, because he's willing to be honest about what happened, because he believes in truth and he believes in the country. And he knows that it would be better for the Democratic Party and the media if they stop playing favorites. So they'll be here in a minute. I'm going to run through news today. Then, as always, with peace, love, and understanding bursting out of every pore of my being, and a presumption of grace to everyone who might raise their hand, love for you to be part of the conversation. So if you'd like to be part of the conversation and you're here on the Two-Way platform, please raise your hand. Now, sometimes, for those of you who spend 2 hours a day with me, and now 3 if you watch my my podcast next up, even my dad can't watch all 3 hours, so I give you a pass. You know that sometimes in the morning show I say, if we don't get 3 new people raising their hands, we're going to cancel the show. Tonight's the night I do that on this program. Okay? If you've never asked a question and you want the show to continue, please raise your hand and be part of the conversation. We need 3 people who've never appeared on this program to raise their hand and ask questions, or tonight's the last episode. When I've done it on the morning show, we've always gotten 3 new people every time. It's never failed. What if it fails on this show? Pretty dramatic. I get tomorrow night off. Tomorrow night's show, by the way, for those of you who are regular viewers, it'll be on YouTube at the regular time, but it's going to be live, no, at 2:30, right? 2:30 Eastern time.
Yep, 2:30 Eastern.
We're going to have a special time and a special episode. We're going to talk all about the 2028 presidential candidates for both parties, but with the focus on the Democrats. So if you want to talk about that tomorrow, 2:30 Eastern time, please come. Also tomorrow, morning meeting, 9 a.m. Eastern time, and also the second episode of my new video podcast on the Megyn Kelly Network. Next up, my guest will be California Governor Gavin Newsom. Some say a potential presidential candidate. So tomorrow you can spend 3 hours with me if you'd like, 9 a.m. Eastern time. And then the podcast will drop later in the day. And then this program, again, if you want to be part of the two-way experience, be able to be live here and ask questions, 2:30 Eastern time, you'll get a notification to my Substack with all the information that you need to be part of it. I hope you will join. Now to the news and then to our guests. The president, centerpiece of the day, was a cabinet meeting, open press. Fox News covered a lot of it, maybe all of it. The other networks dipped in. I watched almost all of it. I had to go to a meeting, so I missed the end. But the president talked at some length. I'm going to show you, and others talked. He did that thing he's done previously where he goes around and lets lots of people talk. And I'm going to show you that, including some pretty interesting comments from the vice president, a seeming farewell to Elon Musk, who attended, and Susie Wiles spoke. It didn't say anything of great consequence, but we don't often hear the great Susie Wiles open her mouth in public. So that'll be interesting. So we're going to play all that for you. But first, here's the president from a later event. Much to talk about the economy today. Number two, as we talked about this morning on the morning meeting, the first quarter GDP was not good. Now, of course, the president economy shrinks as imports surged ahead of tariffs. Of course, the president has not been president for the entire quarter, but he's been president for, I'm bad at math, a majority of the quarter. And yet he blamed most everything that's going wrong. It's interesting. Everything that's going wrong in the economy is Joe Biden's fault, but everything that's going well with the economy, Donald Trump takes credit for. Roll number one, please.
They buried companies in crippling regulations, waged war on American energy, pushed massive tax hikes, and gave us the worst inflation in the history of our country. In Biden's final year, the United States had the worst trade deficit ever recorded, and we lost 106,000 manufacturing jobs. Other than that, he's done a fantastic job. But now all that is changing, and all that's changing very fast, because we finally have the president who wants to put our country first. You have a president who believes in America first. In the first quarter GDP numbers just out today, core GDP, now we're removing distortions from imports, inventories, and government spending, was up plus 3%. But this is Biden's economy because we took over on January 20th. And I think you have to get us a little bit of time to get moving. But this is the Biden economy.
So there are people in the media saying, I read today, several people said, well, he can't say it's the Biden economy for much longer. Well, I don't know what they mean by can't, because I think he'll finish his term saying that anything that's still wrong with the economy is the overhang of Joe Biden. And it's going to be super interesting to see what goes forward here. I continue to get plaintive emails and texts from business leaders who tell me just extraordinary stories, whether they're small business or Fortune 500, just extraordinary stories about the disruptions going on and how, and I'm saying this, sometimes people talk about people in the Trump administration or outside, but allies. They say they're speaking to an audience of one. They're saying things for Donald Trump. I'm saying this not just for an audience of one, but one particular pen pal of mine. I get how many business people, including overseas, but a lot of American business people, think what President Trump is doing on the world economy is insane. Not just bad policy, not just they're not sure it's going to work out. They think it's insane. And they think he's single-handedly, through his own actions, destroying the world economy. And today the president talked about how kids might not have as many choices for toys, and toys might cost a little bit more. But he said, well, that's okay. People will deal with that. That kind of cavalier attitude towards the disruptions that's being caused, again, in my world, because I know a lot of people in the private sector, and some politicians think this is insane. They think it is stupid beyond belief. And maybe the best tour guide of that point of view, just because he's very smart and on point and speaks frequently on social media, is Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary, president of Harvard. Don't hold that against him. Again, it's a serious point of view. And the president today, again, blaming Joe Biden for what's going wrong. All right. Here is J.D. Vance from the cabinet meeting. This is pretty long, but worth hearing, talking about a range of things, including this theme that whatever's bad in America is a hangover from Biden, and Donald Trump has improved things. Number 5, please.
President, thank you, and thanks to the cabinet. So, at the risk of insulting everybody else at the table, I believe that I'm the youngest member sitting at the table. And, it occurred to me that from the time that I was born to the time that Donald J. Trump was inaugurated just a few months ago, we went from, again, 40 years, we went from the world's manufacturing superpower to one in which we depend on the People's Republic of China to make the things that we need. We went from the proudest military in the world to one in which we failed to meet our recruiting goals. And we went from one in which bipartisan border policy was the consensus of both Democrats and Republicans to one in which we allowed 20 million people to run roughshod illegally over the countryside, causing crime, causing a stress in the welfare system. And again, that happened over the lifetime of the youngest member of the cabinet. And what has happened in 100 days is that we've started to reverse every single one of those negative trends. And I think what it shows to me is that the president, and you sit in the Oval Office and you see these portraits of presidents past. And let's be honest, most of them have been placeholders. They've been people who've allowed their staff to sign executive orders with an auto pen instead of men of action. And the reason the media attacks this administration as chaotic is because the president is solving the problems the American people set about to solve. He's actually doing the things that he promised that he would do. And Mr. President, it's been an honor to be part of it for the past 100 days. And let me just make one other observation, because it's interesting. I've seen the data, I've monitored it, I've looked at it, but the most underreported fact of the first 100 days is that we came in with a massive recruitment shortfall. And in 100 days of Secretary Hegseth and President Trump's leadership, we now have people breaking down the doors to join our military. To the media assembled here, it's a really interesting question. Why has that happened? Completely aside from the fact that I think it's a good thing, or I think that President Trump deserves political credit for it, why did we go from a military where people didn't want to serve to now all of a sudden they do want to serve? That's a story you guys should cover. But compared to that, how much time have you instead focused on the fact that we deported an MS-13 gang member with a valid deportation order? And why is it that the press is so focused on the fake BS rather than what's really going on in the country? I think that what we've shown, sir, is that you can do a lot. You can do a lot in 100 days, but you've also unfortunately revealed that too much of the American media hasn't learned the lessons of the past 40 years. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so I never read the chat. As you know, I did glance at it, though, and somebody wrote, JD is a badass. I have to tell you, the guy is so sophisticated about everything. Like, he really is. I've covered a lot of politicians who are sophisticated about politics or the media or policy or the bureaucracy. This guy is so sophisticated. He's so sophisticated. And he's aware of MAGA. He's aware of non-MAGA. He's just a very aware guy. He's got peripheral vision in both directions. And I'm not here to tell you he's going to win the election in 2028, but he's got a lot of strengths. And as someone else said in the chat, he's great at sucking up, which is an important skill. I don't believe any hands up from anybody who's never raised their hand before. So I'll tell you now, 45 minutes to the final episode. So if you're on this platform and you've never raised your hand, please let tonight be the night so the show continues. All right, here is number 4. This is Elon Musk being a participant in the cabinet meeting after Susie Wiles told the New York Post that Elon is not working out of the White House nearly as much as he used to. He's maybe in Texas. I don't know where he is. He's working remotely, and he's spending time on his businesses. Here is more from the cabinet meeting about Mr. Musk.
The American people voted for secure borders, safe cities, and sensible spending. And that's what they've gotten. A tremendous amount has been accomplished in the first 100 days. As everyone has said, it's more than has been accomplished in any administration before, ever, period. This portends very well for what will happen for the rest of the administration. I think this could be the greatest administration since the founding of the country.
Well, we all want to thank you for your help, too. You really have sacrificed a lot
been treated very unfairly.
Well, they do like to burn my cars, which is not great. You know, could be better.
But you have been treated unfairly. But the vast majority of people in this country really respect and appreciate you, and this whole room can say that very strongly. You've really been a tremendous help. You opened up a lot of eyes as to what could be done, and we just want to thank you very much. And you know, you're invited to stay as long as you want. At some point, I guess he wants to get back home to his cars and his. You've done an incredible job. $150 billion. Think of that.
Yeah. It's 160 now.
Yeah, 160. They said, "Oh, it could have been more." And a lot of stuff is being worked on. That number could be doubled and even tripled. A lot of things are being worked on that we don't count yet because it's not quite there. But you've done a fantastic job, and we appreciate it very much, Elon. You know,
thank you. It's also an honor to work with your incredible cabinet. I just like to say thank you, everyone. It's great to work with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Raise a cup of kindness yet. Seems like that was kind of a valedictorian thing, but I think he'll still be around. Susie Wiles, you might have seen her in the background shot. I covered Susie Wiles back when she was working for the Trump campaign in 2016. Incredibly competent person. And she's talked a couple of the meetings the president's called on her, but she doesn't speak very often on camera. So here is Susie Wiles, number 6, talking about the first 100 days.
I'll be brief so you can hear from these amazing people. Congratulations to everyone on 100 days. That's been it's unparalleled in my memory and best I can tell ever. But it hasn't been busy for busy's sake. The president's promises made to the American people have been kept time and time and time again. You all have been out there spreading the word with community groups and states and media. It hasn't gone unnoticed, and let's work hard to the next 100 and have equally as much success then. Thank you.
And you've done a great job, Susan. I think everybody agrees.
Yes.
Very self-effacing, as you can see there. And again, she's not perfect. If you don't like the Trump administration, you probably don't like Susie Wiles. But I will say another example of bias. The first White House chief of staff who was a woman was a Democrat, and she was as beloved and well thought of as Susie is, and doing such a high volume of work, she'd be being profiled everywhere. She'd be covered everywhere in a very favorable way. And Susie's gotten a little bit of that, but not very much. And again, rare to hear her speak. All right, there's a little bit of other news today, some related to our favorite, I say that in air quotes, deportee. So pronounce it deportee. Kilmar Abrego Garcia. But we're going to skip that for now. I see a couple of hands up that might be new. I'm not sure. Might be new. And I want to save the show. So I'm going to take a few questions, then bring in our guests. Jill, have you asked a question on this show before? You haven't. Jill, welcome in. Going to unmute you and add you in here. If you could unmute. There you go. Jill, welcome in. Thank you for being 1/3 of the way towards saving the show. Tell everybody who doesn't know where you are and what's on your mind.
I live in Sisters, Oregon, which is a very small little mountain town.
Yeah. How far off the West Coast are you?
I'm about 2.5 hours southeast of Portland.
Okay, that's a rural area.
Over the mountain. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Over the mountain. All right. Well, welcome in. Glad to have you here. Thanks for being part of Two Way. What's on your mind?
Well, there's two things that I've been thinking about. So first of all, I am a Democrat. I've never voted for Donald Trump.
Okay.
And one of the things that I am really concerned about right now is the situation with who is getting deported. And it seems like it's really hard to figure out what's actually going on.
Yeah, that's a very fair point.
And so I'm concerned. So when all this got talked about, I thought, okay, everybody wants we want to deport criminals, right? But there are people that I feel are getting swept up.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a fair case to be made about that there are numbers of people that are, look, we're going for numbers. And so people that are in legal processes, in the reporting that I'm seeing, there are people that are in process.
Yeah.
They're going to courts, they have a work permit or they have a application in for something, and they can be deported. And I don't think that's what Trump said in his campaign. He talked about legal.
So you're concerned that people are being deported without proper procedures. Is that okay?
Yeah, because because I think ICE agents and people have numbers to meet.
Right. Okay. Stand by for 1 second. There's just announced the U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal, long negotiated, and of course fell victim to that Oval Office blow up between Zelensky and the president and the vice president. So, Jill, that's a great question, a great point. Let's ask our guests again. Michael LaRosa. I know. We're going to get to your second one. Michael LaRosa worked in the Biden administration as a Democratic strategist and now currently works at the firm that Susie Wiles used to work at, a bipartisan DC public affairs shop. And Drew Holden, has been with us before. And as I said, is I call him a witch doctor, maybe godfather of media accountability, managing editor of American Compass, and on whose video podcast I appeared the other day. Drew, you told me we were the number 3 ranked of all time on the American Compass video podcast. We're number 2 now.
Now up to number 2.
Who's ahead of us? Who's ahead of us?
Batya Ungar-Sargon.
My friend Batya.
And she is everywhere on the media.
Yeah, she is everywhere. And including on two-way. I was going to say let's mount a campaign to get us to number 1, but I don't want to overtake Batya. So on the Apple podcast charts now for top rate podcasts, I'm one behind Megyn Kelly, and I pray I don't pass her.
I was going to say
because she gave me the show. So Drew, start with you, and then Michael on this question that Jill asked, her first of 2. Just Drew, first on the accountability question. I keep saying, when Barack Obama was deporting all those people, were any of them improperly deported? Not to create a false equivalency, but this process very messy. Is it possible for the media? Because I think Jill's right. It'd be good for the press to play its watchdog role and hold accountable the federal government to say you shouldn't be deporting people improperly. It seems massive. You would need a lot of reporters at lots of different places. Is that something the press can possibly do? And if not, where's the accountability come from?
Yeah, well, I think one of the big problems here is the lack of local media these days, right? Once upon a time, you could probably do a better job of covering all of the local cases. Where I think the media errs sometimes when it comes to the deportations angle is that they focus not on the cases that might be the most legally dubious, right? Where you have someone who is, potentially denied due process, who is caught up in these sort of these really concerning ICE actions, but instead they focus on the ones that pull at the heartstrings, right? They're driven by clicks. This is something Mark and I talk a lot about. When you have an industry that is most focused on how can I beat someone else to the story, how can I get clicks, I think it naturally draws them to read in the Maryland man of it all. And I don't say that to try and be uncharitable. Right, I'm very open that there are cases where, yes, in fact, the government has moved too swiftly or has ignored some of these due process criticisms. But I think Vance made a really good point, Mark, in that clip that you ran. These are individuals who have deportation orders against them, and my understanding is that overwhelmingly, even the cases that the media is choosing to focus on are the ones where there are standing deportation orders.
Michael, I'm gonna test what I advertised, which is your well-deserved reputation as a truth teller. If people in the government, you serve in the government, and people in the government like you who are savvy about the media, do you think people in the Trump administration are saying to themselves aloud, they'll never be able to cover this. We can get away with it because they'll never cover it, and they'll be so over-focused on one guy that we can do all sorts of things, and they'll never be able to hold us accountable. Is that the kind of thing you think folks in the Trump administration would take into account? How difficult it would be to try to keep from happening what Jill is worried about? Or is that too cynical?
I don't know. I mean, that might even be too cynical. I don't want to believe that that's how they're thinking. What I have thought about was how the administration, and by the way, I just want to say I share the concern for the people who are wrongfully deported. What concerns me, I think, is like from a political perspective, Democratic Party perspective, is that they have set up this, they've set up Democrats to be the preservationists, the restorians to the status quo. And what I mean by that is whether it's elite higher education institutions, whether it is the federal bureaucracy, whether it is people who have committed crimes and were not here legally to begin with. Like my party is becoming those champions because the White House has done such an incredible job at really pitting change versus more of the same.
Right.
And that's my biggest concern. I don't know if that's what Mark, what you said is how they're thinking. I hope not, but they also know how to flood the zone when it comes to driving news.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. That's a really great question.
Michael, let me ask it this way. And then Jill's going to ask her second question. Let's say I was a young, like idealistic Sam Seaborn type brought into the administration, and I worked in the comms department. And I said, look, we've got a great story to tell. We're not doing anything wrong. Mm-hmm. Why don't we every day do a briefing and post on the internet the names of all the people we're deporting and the circumstances? And let's just be transparent about it.
Oh, yeah.
Would that be something that the federal government and the White House would say, yeah, great idea? Or would they be like, you idiot, of course we're not going to do that?
That seems like what their MO generally is. I've been impressed by how they do everything in public view. Even, some people thought it was cold and heartless to put all the pictures of those folks being deported on the White House lawn. But again, they are sort of proud of their policy and their North Star here.
Well, but they just want to talk macro. They just want to say we've deported X number of people and put up the pictures of the easy cases. I say easy in air quotes, like, rapists and murderers. But they're deporting other people. Like, for instance,
they did the line by line with the government spending at the agencies. So
they did, but without a lot of credibility because they keep pulling some of it down. But for instance, I still don't understand why those two mothers of American citizen minor children were deported. I don't know what put them to the front of the line. I've not heard that they were, criminals. So I'd like them to explain that, not the issue of the kids, because I agree with Secretary Rubio. If they left the kids here, they'd be accused of family separation. But rather than saying macro stats, they should tell us everybody because of public interest. All right, Jill, your second question,
can I just
please.
say one thing about what you just said about the kids?
Yeah.
I heard some reporting, and again, I'm just a regular person out here trying to figure out what's going on. But I heard a reporting of one of those cases where the mother wanted the child to go, I think it was back to Honduras. So they sent her back to Honduras, and the judge said, "Well, how do we know that that's the truth?" And he said, "I need to talk to the mother." And they said, "You can't talk to her because she's already gone."
Right. Yeah.
And then,
yeah.
Right. So that's the kind of stuff I'm.
Understood. I appreciate you raising it. And again, it's been turned into just a pure political football and partisan back and forth. But this policy is popular, and certainly it's something the president has a mandate to do. I just wish we had more data, more accountability, more transparency about it, because I think it would make them accountable. Maybe if they knew that every case was being scrutinized, they would be more careful about some of the ones where they have made errors. Jill, real quick, your second topic, please, because if we don't get two other new people in, it'll be the last episode. And while it would be an historic achievement to have appeared on the last episode, I don't think any of us want to see that, except maybe my son. Jill, second question.
By the way, somebody in the chat said, quit watching MSNBC. I don't watch MSNBC. So just for that.
Okay.
Little cheap shot there in the chat.
But there are people who put smack in the chat. They're told not to put smack in the chat, and they do it. It's a testament to my lack of authority or credibility with the audience I serve. Jill, real quick, second question.
Okay, second question. So There's one of the things that Trump is repeating, and he did it in his interview, is the unfairness that he's trying to rectify. When I have read some pretty credentialed economists about trade deficit, Paul Krugman comes to mind, right? Nobel Prize. One of the things that he says is that a trade deficit does not represent a lack of fairness. So I think my experience of the Trump, like the rationale is this is so unfair. And I'd like somebody to say a little bit like, why is it so unfair if we have a trade imbalance? Does anybody have anything to say about that?
Yeah, another good
I've
question.
heard that it's
Another good
not
question.
unfair.
Yeah, understood. Michael, let's do some Econ 101 here.
Yeah, and I'm not I'm not the best person to ask about it. I mean, from what I know about the history of tariffs and his policy is, first of all, he tried to do this in the first term, and it didn't work. In fact, the deficit increased, and it negated the deregulation and the tax cuts that he had already tried to implement. All of the positive optimism that the business community had when he started to reinstitute these tariffs was kind of neutralized. And that's exactly what he's going to do here. He hasn't gotten the tax cut yet. He probably will. And he's doing well on the deregulation front, but all of that's going to be wiped away with these tariff policies. And everybody, the people that I know, or the people that I read and trust, say he's stuck in like a 1980s mentality, as if we're still fighting this trade war with Japan. The history of it speaks for itself. His own record on this stuff in the first administration speaks for itself.
Drew, anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I think I take a different view than Mark than you do, and that others on the show have come on the trade balance, the trade deficit. One of the big problems with the trade deficit is that it means that we are not producing enough in America to satisfy what our consumers need, what our people need. And so we rely instead on a bunch of foreign products. One of the places where this really impacts and intersects with current policy and with the tariffs is on China, right? China manipulates trade in a lot of different ways, with trade barriers, with their own tariffs, by the government supporting manufacturing over there that hollows out American industry. This is why we saw the heartland kind of wither over the last 20 or 30 years. And so, Michael, I'll dispute you a little bit, particularly on the first term tariffs. I don't want to derail the whole conversation. I know we have a lot of other topics. But one of the things that Trump did that Biden actually doubled down on when he came in office was apply tariffs to China. And I think they're a very, very valuable tool in the arsenal of trade tools we have to combat misuse of trade regulations and trade authorities from foreign countries. And he's trying to do that with China and also the rest of the world.
Drew, thank you. Jill, thank you. Thank you for coming on. I think I know the answers to the following questions, but let me just make sure. Andrew, you've asked a question on this show before, haven't you? Andrew, W, yes? Is Andrew frozen? Maybe he's frozen. Don't see any movement there. Chris, you've asked a question on this show, haven't you? Thumbs up, Chris. You haven't? You have. Chris is being ambiguous. Let's bring Chris in and just see. Chris, have you asked a question on this program or not?
If we're technically considering the evening program a different program, I have not.
Different program. Just first time on this program, not on the platform. Chris Jones, welcome in. Remind people who don't know, or tell people who don't know, where you're from. What's on your mind?
Yeah, great to be back. Calling from Davidson, North Carolina. Glad to be with you. Mark, congrats on the new pod. It was great yesterday. Looking forward to tomorrow.
Thank you, sir. It's going to be a good episode. Gavin Newsom will be our guest.
Yeah, a little different.
Along with my friend Jessica Reed Krause.
A little different than Ted Cruz.
Yeah, but they both host video podcasts. And last I looked, they were literally neck and neck. Like Ted, I think Gavin was one slot ahead of Ted. So I'm thinking we'll have a bake-off.
Well, as Ted said, he's incandescently ambitious. So
I'll be
surprise.
I'll be playing that on episode 2. I like to play material from episode. Ted said it about Gavin Newsom, not about himself. We'll see what Gavin Newsom has to say about that. Tune in tomorrow. Chris Jones, thank you for being here and for watching my other show. What's on your mind?
So my question for the group and your guest, we're talking about 100 days, and we're talking about all the success that Trump has had, all that he's done, the unbelievable amount of action. For as many headwinds as Trump has had, as he was expected to have, what do we give credit to? How do we account for the fact that he's been able to get done as much as he has gotten done? What's the explanation for his just tremendous progress?
Which areas are you talking about, Chris, for tremendous progress?
I mean, I think any of them. If you look at tariffs, he's setting the table to do something tremendous. I mean, I don't blame Democrats. I don't blame liberals for trying to throw everything in the kitchen sink at him right now, because if his plan works, if what he's attempting to do is successful with the tax cuts, with the tariffs, if all of that comes together, are we not set for arguably the best 4 years we may have ever seen?
Well, if it does come together, I'll say one of the smartest things ever said in the history of two-way by Steve Elmendorf, the Democratic strategist, who said early on, before Singlegate, before the tariffs, said Trump had the 3 A's. I can almost always remember 2 of the 3, just like Rick Perry. Authenticity, action. Always you forget the 3rd. Authenticity, action, and
attention.
Attention. Thank you. Attention. And I would continue to say, to the extent he's had success, it's the continued progress and flouting of the 3 A's, flaunting of the 3 A's. But clearly things aren't going quite as well. Michael, what do you think of response to Chris?
Well, I think you can give him credit for doing one thing, leading. And he has created the perception that he has done something. Now, they have all 3 branches of government. They have both houses of Congress. They have the White House, and they've passed 5 bills, one being the government funding. So what policies has he passed? Every executive order, and anybody who's worked in the White House, anybody who's worked in government, if we knew that a press release, which is basically what an executive order is, could make you believe that we have accomplished something, my God, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and Biden probably would have done their presidencies over. But these are toothless. I even said that to Laura Ingraham one night. I mean, he's
some of them are autographed press releases, but some of them have real impact on society. Some of them do, Michael.
Kind of. I mean, but they're all temporary. They're all toothless. None of them
is but they can. But they can.
Temporary.
But they can.
Now.
Yeah, they can create 4 years of change. I mean,
big deal. That's what we do all the time. We overturn all of it. We overturned all of his EOs the first day we came in. And the reason why we're operating, the reason why he doesn't do anything on immigration when it comes to working with Congress, even though he has the entire Congress to himself, is because we're still operating under a 1986 law. Why? It takes, there is no executive solution to immigration reform. He's going to do it all through executive power.
You say there's no executive solution, but they've made a lot of progress.
The border's closed.
Yeah, they've made a lot of progress. Well, Michael, fewer people are coming by a lot.
Sure, but I think that was also some of those facts were laid out by the federal government starting in June of last year. I think there was a drop.
The Biden administration started, but the numbers have come down since then. All right, Chris, thank you. I want to make sure we get to our Biden acuity issue because it's important tonight. Andrew, have you asked a question on this program before? Andrew, thumbs up if you've not asked a question before. Thumbs up. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, assuming Andrew's telling the truth, and I have no reason to doubt him, congratulations. The program will live on. Andrew, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Have you been on the platform before or not even ever?
I have called in before, but never got, called to ask a question.
All right, Andrew, welcome in. Thank you for being here. I'm guessing you might be in San Francisco. Could be wrong.
No, this is just the default Zoom background.
Okay. All right. Where are you? Where are you tonight?
I'm in Massachusetts.
Where in Massachusetts?
Waltham.
Waltham, beautiful place, historically important, and near parks, shopping, and mass transit.
Yes, it is.
Congratulations. Yeah, I love that place. Welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell us what's on your mind.
I have a quick question about deportations.
Yes, sir.
I know Rwanda had an offer to Great Britain to take in their migrants. So has the administration spoken to them about, having like a second El Salvador, so to speak, like a backup to El Salvador?
Yeah, great question. I've heard discussions of that outside the government. I don't know that it's been discussed inside the administration. There's certainly thought about Guantanamo as a place people could go, and maybe paying additional countries to take people. But I don't know. I don't know what the status of that is. Either of you two gentlemen know the answer to that? Excellent question. No. Okay. Andrew, I'm going to do some reporting overnight and tune in tomorrow, and maybe we'll know more. Thank you for that. All right. I want to show you a little bit of Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, in a video released just a few moments ago, announcing the U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal. Roll tape.
Thanks to President Trump's tireless efforts to secure a lasting peace, I am glad to announce the signing of today's historic economic partnership agreement between the United States and Ukraine, establishing the United States-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund. This partnership allows the United States to invest alongside Ukraine to unlock Ukraine's growth assets, mobilize American talent, capital, and governance standards that will improve Ukraine's investment climate and accelerate Ukraine's economic recovery. The Development Finance Corporation will participate and help to establish this fund in collaboration with the government of Ukraine. Today's agreement signals clearly to Russian leadership that the Trump administration is committed to a peace process centered on a free, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine over the long term. It's time for this cruel and senseless war to end. The killing must stop, and both the United States and the government of Ukraine look forward to quickly operationalizing this historic economic partnership for both the Ukrainian and American people.
Seems like a positive development. We'll track that. I'm sure we'll talk about more tomorrow. Okay, Drew. It seems to me that on the story of the cover-up of Biden's mental acuity by both the Biden White House and the press, that the press is now in a position where they say, here's a few stories about how some people around Joe Biden knew more than they let on, but that there hasn't been very much, or any, for the most part, acknowledgement of the press's failure to cover it, things that were happening in the open, and the press's continued, for the most part, failure to acknowledge that it wasn't like, oh, we missed it because we weren't looking closely enough, but rather they knew what was happening and they just declined to do it, either because they were browbeat by the Biden administration or they didn't want to help Donald Trump win. What have I left out in terms of the current state of play or gotten wrong?
Well, I don't want to sound like an extremist on this point, but I do think that one of the other things that's left out of this conversation, where they throw up their hands and say, oh, sorry, guys, we missed the story. We missed the story. We were sympathetic to Biden because, we know we can trust the people around him. The press, particularly over the 12 months leading up to the election, played a very deliberate and pretty continuous role in pushing back against conservative criticisms of Biden. Right. I think it actually goes a step further than just, oh, we didn't see it, we ignored it, we should have covered it, we didn't. The media played PR hack in so many cases, whether it was cheap fakes, whether it was the Her report, whether it was other criticisms around Biden and his seeming lack of mental capacity. The press actively, I think, tried to bury this story. So I would put a little.
So again, there's so much on the line here for the credibility of my business, for American history being accurate, and for trying to establish the truth in order to go forward where the press can have credibility with half the country. Okay, so Michael, here is, say, if you don't follow Drew on X, you're making a big mistake. Drew's masterpieces are threads of media accountability, whereas kids say he brings the receipts. Here are some of the receipts from one of Drew's threads. Number 15, please. And again, in real time, people like me and Drew would read these stories and see these headlines and just be dumbfounded that a serious news organization, put up number 15, please. A serious news organization could, with a straight face, write this. So, Michael, New York Times, critics' notebook. For Joe Biden, what seems like age might instead be style. in this respect, the president has something in common with Beethoven, Wagner, and Martin Scorsese. Michael, you've been a journalist, you've worked in the government. How could something like that be written? How does that happen?
What's the critic's notebook? I don't even know what is that, like an opinion piece?
No, it's like a news analysis kind of essay type thing.
Oh, I mean, if they're making excuses for him, sure. I mean, it seems like look, as long as they report the other stuff, you can surely have opinions like that. You can try to, I guess, rationalize some of the things that he did, or some of the behavior you saw, or some of the public outer-facing concerns that people had with him. But look, there were people like Peter Baker at the times who were doing stuff who were reporting on this, at least trying.
Barely. He barely tried. He barely tried.
Andy Linsky did.
And Andy Linsky's there's amongst a few. All right, here's another one. This is an NBC story. And this one, number 16. This goes to one of my favorite / least favorite ways the press engaged in the cover-up, which is once MSNBC put a doctor on, I don't know if you guys remember this, they put a doctor on who actually said he had huge concerns about Biden's mental acuity. That guy was then disappeared.
Yeah.
But what they would do is they would not, if I'd been covering the White House, I would have shut the place down and said, where's the president's doctor? How could the president not be being tested? So here's an NBC headline of this genre. As Biden's memory issues draw attention, neurologists weigh in. Forgetting the names of acquaintances, having difficulty remembering dates from the past doesn't affect decision-making or judgment, brain experts say. Drew, what do you think? What do you think when you see that?
Yeah, well, so a little context before we dive into the piece. So this came out right after the Hur report came out in February of 2024, right, where the special counsel who had been talking to Biden about his documents mishandling allegations from the time had described him in a report as an old man who wouldn't actually be able to stand trial because people wouldn't take him seriously, and that there were real concerns about his kind of mental acuity, about his memory, and all of these sorts of issues. And so you saw immediately after, this is the day of and the day after, the press was littered with experts, nameless experts, at least in headlines, saying, "Oh, it's more complicated than that." The New York Times has this really outlandish kind of report about how we need more evidence to be able to draw conclusions about someone's mental acuity and mental state. We need real tests to be done on this, to say nothing of the fact that the Biden White House addressing these concerns hadn't actually pursued any of those tests, right? And so you have the media, I think in a lot of cases around this report, deliberately obfuscating the actual news, right? The news was this report. The media's take on it wasn't to talk about a specific thing. It was, oh, it's a lot messier than this, and you don't quite understand. We need the experts to help you here. And I think you're right, Mark. One of the things that I think always tips me off to, what the media is saying here might not actually be valid, is they're hiding behind experts to make a claim or an allegation.
Right.
And so in this case, brain experts. I mean, I've talked to many a brain expert in my own life. I don't think that brain experts walk around to ordinarily just help the media. I think they were probably selected to give evasive lines.
Right. All right. Two more, 17 and then put up 18. Just 17, leave it up for a bit, and then 18. So there was a period when these Washington Post cheap fake videos enrapture right-wing media, but deeply mislead. Deeply mislead. So it's true that in some instances, the right did something they shouldn't have done. They made videos of Biden look worse than they were. How Republicans use misleading videos to attack Biden in a 24-hour period. So they put a lot of effort in the media doing quasi-investigative work on how Republicans were doing something they shouldn't have done. And they set the cause back. You didn't need to doctor these videos or slow them down or add funny music to them. They spoke for themselves. But this created the permission structure for the media to say, there's nothing to see here, because anything you're seeing with your own eyes related to Joe Biden's loss of mental acuity is a Republican trick. Republican trick. So, Michael, these stories were pushed by the Democrats. The press did not on their own. So I just ask you again, to the extent you can speak to this either with information or just knowing how things work. They knew Biden had a loss of mental acuity. They knew that these videos gave them an opening to pretend that the issue was not Biden's loss of mental acuity, but Republicans doing something misleading. How did those conversations take place? How do they have the nerve to call reporters and pitch this? How does that work?
Well, there's a lot of assumptions here, and I don't ever make excuses or do much defending of the Biden PR shop. And look, I was one of the few people who always advocated, and I was attacked for this, but always advocated for him to show, not tell. So for every bad moment he has, he should be out there 25 times more, right? To show, not tell. Now, what they did here, I mean, like, look, they punish reporters. They threaten access. I was booked 45 times in 2023 on CNN, and the White House pressured CNN not to ever have me on again after the turn of the year. And I've experienced this stuff now.
Just to be clear, you used to work for Jill Biden. After you left the White House, you were a regular on CNN. The White House decided they didn't want you on television anymore. So they told CNN, basically, don't put this guy on anymore.
Yeah, and they threatened CNN with access, and I was noted in their guest tracking system. So whenever somebody would want to book me, they would see a note or a flag. You have to call it Y and Z. Look, and I had never experienced the media like that before until this election cycle, and that's how my personal views about everything in the media and Democrats have somewhat shifted, and it's cost me a lot of friends because I've been as outspoken as I am. But
but I know you said, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I know you said I was just making a lot of assumptions. But let me lay out the chain here.
Okay.
Joe Biden had a loss of mental acuity that was obvious to anyone with a C-SPAN subscription. Okay. The people in the White House knew that. They might have convinced themselves it wasn't as bad, and he did have good moments. So but they also knew he had bad moments. They knew that he once addressed a dead congresswoman who he knew was dead, but spoke to her as if she was in the room. So they know he has a problem. They know that winning the election before he withdrew as a nominee depended to a not insignificant extent on keeping that conversation from growing, even though polls showed 70% or something of Americans thought he didn't have the acuity. So they needed to, that was their big vulnerability. He wasn't stepping aside. So they knew their job was to minimize conversations about this topic. And so they did things like when they saw an opening to say, well, Republicans have overstepped their bounds because they've doctored some of these videos. Not all of them, but some of them. So what I'm saying is, if you know he's got a loss of mental acuity, they did. If you know winning the White House back and stopping Trump depends to a large extent on keeping that conversation from coming to a head. And then you say, well, we know the press will side with us if we give them the opportunity to side with us. So here's an opportunity to say, hey, press, you don't need to cover Joe Biden's loss of mental acuity. You can cover the sexy concept of deep fakes.
Well,
Cheap fakes. So do they sit at a meeting and say to each other, here's our opening, let's pitch this concept of cheap fakes because this will change the subject, or they wouldn't discuss that amongst themselves?
No, they would. They absolutely would. And they would probably signal a campaign. And there are a core group of attack dogs that were on the campaign and a core group in lower press at the White House. And look, we used Signal every day. We were encouraged to use Signal. The entire White House and our campaigns operated on Signal. So I'm sure they all used Signal to talk about how they were going to coordinate. And also, that would have, going out and finding these medical experts would have been something shiny and new to give the press to, not advance the story, but turn it in a different direction.
Did government officials in the Biden administration use Signal but not document, back up the official government records?
It's a great question. I have no idea why nobody has ever asked the question, because all of our we weren't allowed to text message. And whenever we were texting with reporters, we had to save and turn those in, just like our physical notes. I'm surprised nobody has asked to see the Biden archives records on all the Signal things.
So Drew, I consider the New York Times and the Washington Post to be the biggest offenders based on their influence. Let's say the New York Times watches tonight's episode, and there are people at the paper who watch, and they said, oh my God, we do have a credibility problem with America.
Yeah.
Drew, we're hiring you as a consultant. We're paying you $50,000 a month, which is what Hunter got from
I was gonna say Hunter money
from Burisma. $50,000 a month. Tell us what to do. Tell us how we can conduct ourselves on this story. Do we need to write a 5-part series? Do we need some sort of note from the publisher? They say, Drew, we will do what you think is right to restore our credibility on this story. What would you recommend?
You know, there was a series of essays and pieces called "The Press versus the President" that you may very well be familiar with after the Russian collusion conversation died down, where a number of journalists went on the record and basically said, hey, yeah, we got this wrong. We got this wrong because of our biases and our blind spots and what have you. I think if the legacy media institutions like the New York Times and the Washington Post, if they really wanted to restore credibility, they would go through these pieces. That Washington Post piece we talked about, which I will also add, one of their explanations for why we knew these videos weren't legit was because Biden, quote, has said he doesn't dance. They would go back through these pieces and they would add detailed editor's notes about what we know now, what we should have known then, and then they would publicize those. They would go back and the Washington Post, to their credit, did this after the Russia stuff. They went back and they added detailed author's notes and they wrote stories about their author's notes. So I think step one would be doing that and going back and saying not just, hey, oh yeah, we should have done this thing and we didn't. We deliberately avoided this conversation and we contributed to suppressing it. That would be one.
How do you prove that?
Sorry, how do you prove
how would the Washington Post or the New York Times prove that happened? Would they interview their own reporters to say, what was your mindset, editors?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like one of the conversations that I think was had at the White House Correspondents' Dinner and other places was the knowledge that these conversations were happening off the record with the Biden administration.
Yeah.
Right. And that they knew about these things and didn't say them. And so fine, if you want to leave aside the deliberate cover-up, I think there has to at least be an acknowledgement that what we did, the way we chose to cover this story, effectuated a cover-up of these details. And it wasn't just that we missed it and we didn't see it. It's that we took efforts that ran counter to the thing that we knew was true. That would be step one.
Yeah.
Step two, and I know that this was a big thing back in 2016, would be to actually try and change your newsrooms, right? I think one of the reasons why this is such a problem, and Mark, you and I have talked about this before, is that there is no intellectual diversity in so many of these newsrooms. At least not insofar as there's someone who can put up a hand and say, actually, I don't think that's quite true, or I don't think this is the accurate framing when we talk about Biden and his cognitive capabilities. And so I think if they really wanted to make an effort to win back the American people, they should make a committed effort to get, and it doesn't have to be conservatives, right? It doesn't have to be people who agree or pro-Trump or whatever. It has to be people who are genuinely open-minded, and they have to be in positions where they're not going to get thrown out of town in 35 minutes when they start saying things that don't conform to the liberal bias.
Right. So Michael, let's say Jeff Bezos comes to you and says, hey, I heard the Times hired Drew Holden $50,000 a month. I'm going to pay you $70,000 a month. I want to hire one or two journalists who have full access to the Washington Post reporters to debrief them and to find out how we failed to do our job on this story, how we were complicit in a cover-up that impacted the election. Who are the two people you'd hire to do that reporting?
Let's see. Other than somebody like who's been celebrated already, like Alex Thompson, right? Who has
you whoever you want. Who would be the two people who you would say, newsroom, you're going to talk to these two reporters? Yeah.
Putting me on the spot. I don't know. I mean, I think probably Katie Rogers was somebody who would demonstrate a lot of fearlessness in her reporting at the New York Times. Annie Linsky also did as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want everybody to understand just one thing, and I'm not making excuses. I'm not making excuses for the press either. The Biden mentality, the Biden White House mentality did not view the press as an advocate or an ally, and they never treated them that way.
Correct.
Sometimes I think Democrats in general expect the press to work for them, and when they aren't working for them, it's just like they will come down on you. pretty hard, but they never treated the press with anything other than suspicion, even especially the New York Times, a paper that the Bidens read every day, physical paper to all their homes. They hated the New York Times. I mean, they hated everyone, and they treated them that way.
Correct. All right. Breaking news, or at least breaking news to me, Brett Baer has got an interview tomorrow with JD Vance, who's traveling to South Carolina to go tour a steel mill, I believe. So that'll be happening during this program tomorrow, and we'll cover it live. Gentlemen, thank you both. I'll say again, you think about, well, it's this overkill. We've talked about this story a lot here. Think about all the coverage of January 6th. Again, not saying they're equivalent, but think of all the coverage of that. This story is so important, and it continues to be timely because we're about to have at least one book that purports to address this, purports to address it.
And
Michael.
Mark, watch how often Jake or Alex are booked on MSNBC. Let's see if we've learned anything.
Yeah, let's see. And let's see what the book says about the truth. That's not just about the Biden cover-up, but about the press's complicity. Let's see.
I don't think you mentioned CNET banning Michael for 2024.
Yeah. Gentlemen, so grateful to you. I love having you on. I hope you'll come back regularly. Thank you so much. And Drew, if I pass by you, tell me privately. I don't want to make a big deal of it.
Not at all.
Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time, morning meeting. We'll see you then for that. And then again, if you want to be part of this program tomorrow, to talk about the 2028 presidential field, don't forget, special time, 2:30 Eastern. Go to my Substack for all the details, but it'll be on YouTube at the regular time, but 2:30 Eastern. And then again, dropping tomorrow afternoon will be the second episode of my new show on the Megyn Kelly Network. Next up, my guest, Gavin Newsom, and on my panel, Jessica Reed-Krause. So I will see you for 3 hours tomorrow, and I look forward to it. Gentlemen, again, thank you. Thanks for the 3 people who saved the show. We live to be on another day. Have a great evening.